meeting tonight. So if we can get started on time. It is Tuesday, June 13th, our Education Committee meeting. And we always have Assistant Amy Starzecki and Dr. Mike Carey, curriculum, help facilitate this meeting as well. So we have a few presenters tonight, and we'll have them introduce themselves when their section is up. But welcome folks who are here observing and or presenting with us. We'll start with the Assistant Superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. I think I will be brief this month. This is the time of year where end of the year procedures and events are happening, which is keeping our calendars busy. I just indicated on here all of the graduation ceremonies that we held last week across the district. I've had many staff say, we appreciate you so much for coming, and my response is always, it's one of the best parts of my job. So they're always enjoyable, and I always look forward to those events every year. So that has been a busy part of our end of the year process. The second part of my report just highlights a little bit of the work that we've been doing with principal and teacher evaluations. One of my primary duties is evaluation and supervision of principals, and per our principal evaluation process that aligns to state statute, that includes end of the year meetings, as well as time to reflect on how the year went, reflect on the goals that they set at the beginning of the year and whether those goals were met. Additionally, one thing we piloted last year was a staff survey, and a handful of principals piloted that last year. This year, all principals participated, and so we crafted a survey that went out to all staff with the intent of helping our principals get some good feedback on things that are going well and areas to consider for professional growth as we move into the next school year. So we are reviewing those together and setting goals for next year together. The same process is happening with our teachers. Our principals are working with our teachers to take a look at those end of the year goals and whether they met those goals and what data they used to identify whether goals were met. Both principal and teacher evaluations, all the documents that we're using for these processes are stored in My Learning Plan, which is a software program which has made it much easier to manage all the paperwork requirements that go along with teacher and principal evaluations. Lastly, in order to support my own professional growth, I also took the survey that was distributed to staff, and I tweaked it through my lens and asked that the folks that I work with directly complete that survey as well. So I pushed that out to some cabinet folks, directors, and principals to get feedback on my own professional growth as we move forward, and I'll be able to share some of those things moving into the next school year when it comes to developing my own professional goals. And then lastly, summer school will soon be underway. Cynthia Maldonado is the Stowe principal, and she's been tasked with getting the elementary sites organized. We will be having summer school this year at Lester Park, Congdon Park, Lowell, Myers-Wilkins, Laura MacArthur, Piedmont, and Stowe. Sessions will run Monday through Thursday, the weeks of the 19th, and the 26th of this month. We'll take the week of the 4th of July off, and then we'll run again July 10th and July 17th. So those will soon be underway, as well as our ALC and credit recovery programs will also be started at the secondary level in the weeks to come. And that's all I have for that.
Any questions? I actually have a question in terms of summer school. For the secondary students, where will that be held?
Secondary credit recovery will be held at Denfeld. Independent study will be held at ALC. And students who take part in the independent study, that's not like a daily occurrence that they come in. That's more of a check-in basis once a week, or online they do check-in. So the seat-based program, credit recovery program, will be at Denfeld.
Okay. Amy, we can move on then to the next item, and that's the school resource officers, roles and practices. And so could you all please come and join us, Mike and Dan and Laura and Brenda? Yeah. And I ask our presenters to introduce themselves, and maybe we can also just go around real quick so we can, I don't think everyone had a chance to meet them.
Well, I'll start off. I'm Sergeant Michael Fontaine. I am the Sergeant of the Juvenile Services Unit with the Police Department, and I have sorry about that. So I run this, the juvenile unit in the police department, and part of that is overseeing the SRO program, which includes 4 school resource officers at the 2 high schools and 2 middle schools. I'm also a former SRO myself, parent of 2 kids in the school, and also I have a spouse who's a staff member in the district as well. So turn over to Dan here.
Okay. Dan Chicos, Duluth Police Department. I'm the lieutenant in charge of our Major Crimes Bureau, which the Juvenile Services Unit falls with underneath.
Hello, I'm Laura Marquardt. I'm the Deputy Chief in charge of administration and investigations for the Duluth Police Department.
And I'm Brenda Vathauer. I'm fortunate to work with the resource officer at Lincoln Park Middle School.
Board, why don't we just quickly go around and introduce ourselves. And again, thank you all for being here.
I'm Perry Welty. Glad to see you all.
Alana Oswald.
Mike Carey, I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Amy Starzecki, Assistant Superintendent.
Rosie Leffler-Camp, Chair of the Education Committee.
Bill Gronseth, Superintendent.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'll start us off here. What we're going to do is just kind of discuss the SRO program and what our involvement in the schools and kind of what we do and don't do. There'll be a brief kind of synopsis at the end about the DARE program, which we're in the process of trying to implement here. And so I won't get into too deep in that, but that's one of our other projects we're involved with. So this slide just kind of covers the School Resource Officer program, our department mission, and how the SROs fit into that and help support that mission statement. Basically, it's to developing those relationships and serving in a caring and respectful manner. I'm going to try to work this here. So here's what our SROs do. Whoops, sorry. Had to work through this here. Here's what our SROs do. They spend time intervening on, obviously criminal cases, mentoring students. You'll see them in the classes teaching. Some of them do some coaching, role modeling, and just having a positive relationship with these kids that has actually, in my experience, paid off in other areas as well outside of the school. If you have questions at all at any time during this, please let us know. So here's kind of the technical term, which you'll see is what we do. Part of what we do is help reduce delinquency in the schools, crime in the schools and the community, and help students, staff, and parents develop a better understanding of law enforcement, help develop those relationships as part of that community policing program. You can see down there kind of what we're assigned to do. It's conducting criminal investigations sometimes. In reality, that's probably a small portion of what we do. More of what we do is act as a liaison between educators, parents, students, mentor students, some of them teach classes, and basically develop relationships with these kids and kind of help bridge some gaps that we've seen over the years. Put the wrong button there. So here's most important what we do. We recognize that school and community are not exclusive of each other. I've heard over the years doing this job that people say, well, that's a school issue or that's a community issue, and they're not, especially when it comes to kids. What happens outside of school comes into the school, what happens in school comes outside into the community, and so they can help bridge that gap and help deal with some issues that may arise in one place or the other. This allows us to develop relationships with the youth that extend outside of the school, builds trust. And I put a little star there because every one of us who've done this job as SROs have built trust with kids in the school that has paid off outside in school, where kids have learned to trust us where they wouldn't trust other people and will tell us, confide in us things that they probably normally wouldn't. I mean, I have stories of several incidences where kids say, hey, you know what, I got something to say, but I'm only going to talk to Officer LaFontaine because they know that. Whereas if we didn't have that relationship, there's things that they wouldn't report that probably need to be dealt with. And so that's really what this boils down to, is just having that person they can develop some relationship with and help a better contact and communication. Provides a resource for the school staff and parents dealing with just adolescent-related issues. It's an informal counselor. We're not licensed, but with our experience in dealing with crime over the years and seeing how kids can make positive versus negative choices, we can sit with kids and their parents and help them understand the processes in the system and, the consequences sometimes of behavior. Teacher, we have officers who will teach classes. Eventually, we'll hopefully have the DARE program, so there'll be some teaching going on there. And a lot of the time, we're developing alternative solutions to criminal behavior, so to speak, that involves things other than the criminal justice system. In the old days, if a school didn't have an SRO, they would call the cops. The cops would get there, do their investigation, write a ticket and whatnot, and be on their way. This way we can find other alternatives outside of the criminal justice system that are beneficial to the children, if those are so warranted. We work with educators and parents to help develop student success and identify and educate emerging social trends that affect student safety. We deal with that on a constant basis. Our officers working with families, staff, and kids on, social media, smartphones, and all that kind of stuff, and the dangers they pose. That a lot of times the parents just don't have that knowledge base, and we can help bridge that. So a lot of those issues, as you can see, aren't even criminally related. Popular to contrary belief, here's what we don't do. We don't enforce school rules. Okay, that's not, some people think we go out there and we enforce school rules. That's not our issue. We don't enact school discipline. And we're not hall monitors, and we're not there only for emergencies. We're not the Praetorian Guard standing above everybody else to pounce once a rule is broken. That's not what we do. We're there for that community resource and to help bridge some gaps and develop different options for things. And that's really what we're all about. With regards to the district, we can provide the district with a continuity person, someone they can go to and they have questions. They know who we are instead of having to dial a number and trying to figure out who can help us out with this problem. And also provides the officers with a point of contact with someone who knows who's who in the district if they have issues with stuff. I mean, we've had some things that happen outside the community that may be school related that they know to come to me or one of the SROs to get some information or talk to staff and stuff like that instead of trying to hunt and peck and figure out where to go. So it's a continuity between the police department and the district so everybody knows who to go to for help. And also provides the police department with a resource on juvenile related topics. The DARE program, this next slide just kind of covers the DARE program, and I think everyone's fairly familiar with that. We had it up here for a while. Eventually it went away due to funding and stuff like that. But now we're looking at reinstilling the program, how it's going to fit in. And the DARE program is now, it's advanced from the old days of drugs are bad, MK, don't do drugs, to really teaching these kids resiliency and how to deal with lots of different problems that they're going to face outside of drugs, whether it's sexting issues that they're going to run into, bullying, just behavioral issues that they might face and how to work through those types of things and develop better skill sets. And so we're working through right now on where that's going to go and what it's going to look like. Both two of our SROs, June Sacchetti and Chris Johnson, have been through DARE training, and DARE Minnesota is very excited about us reinstalling that program and having it go from there. So I think that's going to be a huge asset because that'll be hopefully at a younger age level so these kids can start seeing some of our cops at a sooner, and then when they get into high school and middle school and stuff like that, they know some faces and stuff like that. So that's our program in a nutshell. I can turn over to Dan or Lori here if they want to add anything at all to it.
I'll just speak on behalf of our resource officer, Officer Sacchetti. What you touched on is exactly spot on. It's about relationships. It's about working with students and families. Officer Sacchetti is at all of our family fun nights. We had a lock-in for a positive perk reward. Officer Sacchetti was there. She was in her shorts. She was in the swimming pool. She was with the kids. The kids have a lot of respect for her, and I think that relationship is built with her. We have kids that ask for her, exactly what you said. They'll seek her out. She's very, I tell you, I notice when she's not in our building. I go to her a lot just to help with students. And she's also built relationships with kids prior to them coming to Lincoln Park. She's at the Valley Youth Center. In the summer, she spends time there. She rides bike with kids. she gets to know them before they even arrive at us, so that relationship continues. And it's about teaching. I know one of the last things we did a couple weeks ago together was we had a student call from a teacher's phone, call 911. Teacher was in the hallway having a conversation, student picked up the phone, called 911. And rather than punishment, we use it as a teachable moment. So Officer Sacchetti, myself, and the parents sat down and we had a conversation about why we don't do that. So it's teaching, teaching, teaching at the middle school. So I hope she continues to, be with us, so we have resource officers because they're very valuable.
I just, as a former principal, my relationships with SROs typically, they don't get involved in situations until they're called upon by the building principal. Is that pretty much the case with the 4 sites that we have?
For the most part, yeah. If it becomes a criminal investigation issue, yeah. But, I mean, obviously they're out in the hallway and a teacher might come to an officer and say, hey, I'm having some struggles with a kid. Can you help me? So we'll sit down and talk with them. Parents might call. I've had parents call me up and say, hey, I want you to throw a scare into my kid and make him do right. And I'm like, that's not what we do. So it can come from the principals, if they have a serious investigation, or you may have just one-on-ones with kids. I've had kids come into my office and plop themselves down and want to tell me all sorts of stuff that, they're just, young kids wanting to talk about life. And so it's things like that. So it comes from all sorts of different aspects, yes.
Superintendent Grunstead, then Harry, and Member Oswald.
I know one of the concerns that I hear are that the school-to-prison pipeline concept and criminalizing behaviors that wouldn't be otherwise criminalized, and this thought that tickets are given out regularly at school for things, for anything. Can you speak to that and when that would be the case?
Yeah, and I'm familiar with that, and that's not how we operate. It's not about charging kids with crimes. I mean, it happens, absolutely. And we, look at each case-by-case scenario. We don't have a blanket policy. There's no zero-tolerance policies. If the A equals B, there's C. We take a look at a lot of the situations, prior behavior, the seriousness of the event, are there outside things going on unrelated to school that we think that we need to take a further approach to. All those things take into consideration with each case. So there's not one blanket approach, and the idea is to find other alternatives in the criminal justice system. So that's really what our goal is. Because we know that kids are growing up, they're learning, they make mistakes, and so the goal isn't here to jam kids up, and there's nothing good comes of that if we can avoid it.
This might be a follow-up to what you're saying. I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in and ask it, but can you share about what kind of cultural training that your officers have had because of the diversity in our community?
I know they've been to all of them have been to CIT training, so they're familiar with that. I can't think of any specific cultural training they've attended. But they work a lot with the staff of, the integration specialists and the advocates and that sort. So they have a lot of contact with those folks to help them understand some situations and get some feedback on what's going on.
Thank you. Member Welty?
Thank you. It's, as I said, it was nice to have you here. I remember when my children were at Chester Park 25 or 30 years ago, and we had Officer Wick. I'm kind of curious, you're all sort of in semi-civilian clothes here, and I can't recall, but I sort of think Officer Wick was in uniform at the time, and I don't think that the ticket writing you're talking about used to be far more prevalent. So obviously there's been an evolution of the SROs in the district. Can you give me a sense about how the police department and its history has regarded the connection between the police and the schools in terms of what it hopes to accomplish, and how do you think you're meeting that goal?
What we're trying to accomplish here, it goes back to that community policing concept. We're trying to develop relationships with people in areas we may not have had them. There's always been that cop, juvenile, youth kind of antagonism, anxiety, and we're trying to break down those barriers. It allows that kids can have a better relationship with the police, and it carries on well beyond our careers and outside of the school. And when I got out of the schools, working the street, I remember going on calls and kids would see me and you could just sense there was a sense of calm when they saw, hey, I know that officer, things are going to be okay. Whereas if you didn't have that, things might get ratcheted up a little bit. So those are it's a big picture thing. It's how we kind of focus on things in the future and outside of the school and those relationships. When you go to the uniforms, each officer kind of has their own, what they want to wear. We have, sometimes they'll wear their uniform. It's on a big event or something like that, or maybe the first years of school. I wore mine a lot. And kids really it's amazing how many kids will come up and approach you and ask you questions. So some people think that that's a pushback, but kids really found that interesting, and they would approach you and ask you questions and stuff like that. So it was actually a kind of a conversation starter. You can see some pictures of June. She'll wear whatever the uniform is or whatever the Spirit Day is and stuff like that. I mean, unfortunately, she's a Packer fan, so we have to work through that. But, we've kind of humanized it a lot there. And I recognize years ago there's a lot of ticket writing, and we've really focused on not going that route if we can and finding other solutions. And sometimes we don't have a choice, or the severity of the situation requires that. And then, we work with the prosecutors and stuff like that and what other options are available beyond that. So,
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Knowing that sometimes formal police attire might come across as intimidating, or is it encouraged, or would it be supported if there was more casual dress that our officers in the schools would be, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Would it be acceptable, or is that okay if they were more casual as opposed to uniform?
I don't have an issue with that. I mean, it's a policy question that levels above my head. But I think as long as people knew who they were, that's one thing. But this is what I wore a lot for the years. I know McClure wears this kind of uniform too. But whatever, as long as people know who they are, help first of all. But at the same time, is it have a softer approach? And there's a lot of different data and stuff like that. But I could divert to Laura on that in the uniform issue, but I don't see a huge issue from my experience.
And
Just hit the light there.
from an administrative perspective, we don't really have any issue in regards to uniform, not uniform. It's really about what works in that school with that officer, that school environment, that culture. And that might change like on a day-to-day or a week-by-week depending on what's going on. And we prefer to look at it as giving our SROs the latitude to kind of make that a choice as to what they feel is appropriate with the school and their culture. So we don't have you must wear a uniform that looks like a traditional police officer. It really can be fluid.
Good. Do you want to shut your lights off just because it impacts other lights? No, that's okay. Thank you. Member Oswald?
I have two questions. First, I understand what we get out of this arrangement, especially from Ms. Vadhauer's testimony here, but what does the Duluth Police Department get out of this? Why do you guys find it valuable to be a part of this process?
Well, as I stated before, we develop a relationship with kids that make our job easier. I mean, like I said before, I've been on calls when I've been out of it, and after I got done, I got promoted to street sergeant. And when you're dealing with kids in the street, things are a little bit more calmer because they know you, so it makes things easier, safer. We develop those relationships. They're willing to come and give us information sometimes on crimes because they know us. I know kids have reported to me pretty serious offenses that they wouldn't report to anybody else because they didn't know them, but we developed that relationship. So it basically sometimes it helps us provide a better service to the community when we have those relationships with these kids as they move on too.
Sure.
I'd like to comment on that too. From a police department perspective, if we're initiating contact with individuals when they're 16, 17, 18, 19, that's too late. We know that if we have conduits and connections to kids when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and work at building positive relationships, good choices, good influence, we're going to be much less likely to be having negative contact with them when they're 16, 17, and 18. And that's just statistically factual, and it's also logically, and practical. And as a police department, we really want to focus on our outreach to our youth because it makes a huge impact. The biggest age group that impacts crime is 16 to 25. That age group impacts a lot of statistics, whatever you want to haul out, but it impacts crime too. And the more we can make a difference on that end of it, the better our community is as a whole, not just the police department. But that's how it impacts, that's the impact for us. I mean, if we are able to build those relationships at the early years, we know we're going to end up having more productive community members and far less negative interactions as they age.
Thank you. Member Oswald, your second question?
And I don't know if this is something you can ask or something Superintendent Gronseth can answer, but I was wondering, you've mentioned being involved in the criminal investigations with students in our schools. About how many do our SROs handle in a typical year, and is that relatively stable over the course of years, or is it going up or down? Is there a trend? Just ballpark. I know we don't have specific statistics.
I have to take a look at the numbers we had at one point. I don't have them off the top of my head. Just anecdotally, I've noticed over the years our criminal involvement investigation behavior seems to have gone down somewhat. And you could argue that things have gotten safer, or that these SROs are finding different alternatives so we don't have to make formal documentation that now registers as a statistic. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Number-wise, we've had a few tickets given out. I couldn't tell you. I made myself a note. I can let you know. I can get back to you.
Okay. Member Harla, and then Member Chair Kirby. Sorry.
Thanks. I'm wondering if also there are school policies that drive certain things too, or like when it gets to school suspension, for example, or it gets to, this all ties in together. I know that we are working on suspension rates, and that is a priority that the district has had for a long time and is also being brought forward by the community again. And so just wondering if you could comment a little bit on that. I don't exactly know what the question is, but I know that there's a tying in, and how are we making sure that our policies aren't disproportionately affecting certain populations. I know specifically when we looked at the data in the past, communities of color specifically had a lot more. And so does that also go with the tickets as well too in our schools? So, yeah. And then I have a second question.
Okay, Superintendent Gronseth, if you want to answer that, and then we'll go back to you, Member Harla.
And I'm guessing Assistant Superintendent Starzecki was going to jump in there too, and if I don't say what you were going to say, then you can jump in as well. First off, I want to say that there's not a connection between suspensions and involvement by our SROs. The SROs don't really have a role to play in when students are suspended or not suspended or expelled. Those processes are completely separate. That's a decision that is ultimately made by a school administrator or principal is making the call on suspensions. If it got to an expulsion level, that is when it goes to assistant superintendent. That's a mouthful. It goes to Amy's office. And so I just wanted to clarify that piece. Some events are listed in our student handbook in the disciplinary section. It requires a notification of the police. Some behaviors would include weapons, assault, drug possession, drug sale. Those are some of the areas that require us to notify police. Instead of calling 911 for the police, we're able to reach out to our SROs, who very often have a relationship with a student and are able to work with students at a completely different level. I'd also say that in being an assistant principal at a high school, I have experience working with SROs too. And there have been times when either the SRO is away from the building or at a training, and there's been situations where we would have to call 911. And it's a very different experience working with an officer who's coming into the school without those relationships to someone who's already in the school and has that relationship. They approach students differently, they approach families differently, and their presence in the school is at a different level because of the familiarity. And I would say that having them on site helps us to avoid escalating some of those situations because of those relationships.
Amy?
I don't really have anything more to add, just again to clarify that typically if there is an incident that happens at the school and it's potentially illegal activity, then that's when we would contact our SROs, and at that point it becomes a separate investigation. Those processes are different. Suspension and expulsion is different than a police matter, so those kind of separate at that point. And again, we've been working to reduce suspensions, find alternatives to suspensions, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we have been successful in the last 4 years or so in making some dramatic reductions in suspensions, and I think that is a direct result of finding alternatives to suspension. So we still have work to do there, but that is a little bit separate than the police matter. Yeah, thank you.
Your second question?
Yeah. I'm just a quick comment before I ask my second question. I'm really glad to hear that DARE has been updated. I heard it, I work in the public health realm, and we talk a lot about how you used to get kids really interested in drugs versus it not. So I'm glad to hear that it's coming back, and I'm so glad. I know that the police department is so connected with public health departments and all these other places in the area. So glad to hear it's coming back and that it's updated, not getting kids excited about drugs. I was going to ask about scheduling of SRO time. I've heard that it's kind of different at each school, and I guess how does that negotiation piece look like? I understand at some schools, like they come in early but then leave before the end of the school day, is there a negotiation of hotter times that may happen, or other pieces? I guess that's a question of with our contract, how is that handled?
It kind of works within the school and where their needs are and stuff like that. Recognize our guys, our officers have, a lot of times they might have to leave to, take care of paperwork. Sometimes the district computers don't interact with ours as well, so they got to go, work with our systems, do paperwork, process evidence. There's training they have to go to. Sometimes if there's an investigation regarding their students that happened outside of school, they may have to go do some follow-up with that. So really what we kind of focus on is what works for each school, because I can't say it's, it just doesn't make sense to say, hey, it's going to be this way at every school. Some of the times the SROs will dip down to the elementary schools. If the elementary principals have some concerns or questions, or they're going to work on some project down there too. So it really depends on what's going on and where the needs are too.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Chair Kirby?
Oh, thanks. Thanks for coming. My question needs a brief answer. One of the roles that you put down here is teacher, and you talked about teachable moments and things like that. But is there any formal classroom teaching?
Yeah, there is. It's a lot of the times the teachers will say, "Hey, can you do a class on this topic or that topic?" So they'll come up there and they'll do a presentation on something that may be police related or something else that they might have experience and stuff in. So there are some formal teaching points. Yep, absolutely.
Good question. Member Welty?
One last question. Do all our schools have SROs at some point during the school year?
Yep, middle schools and high schools, and they're encouraged to connect with the elementary school principals, and some of them will go to those locations. They know, I think most elementary school principals know who their SROs in their area are, so they'll be able to reach out to them if they got something going on. It's not as much, but they are available to them.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have one more question. I know
No, that's great.
there was a lot of chatter this year in response to the use of an external agency utilizing drug dogs, and I do know that I guess, can you explain your relationship? And because I know we have them within our units locally. I guess how is there a stronger point of communication now between the schools and? Can you talk a little? Yeah.
I know that was kind of contentious when it first came out. Really, what it boils down to, we have K-9 units. The problem with their schedule, their schedules are usually night, and most of their free time when they have time off is engaged in training. And so getting them to be able to come into school when a school administrator needs it, it's not always that easy. We can set something up, but that might be weeks or months in advance. With regards to the private service, that's a school issue. They run that themselves. If they alert on something, then they'll bring us in and we'll look in to see if there's enough there and how we want to handle it. So we look at it as more of, if a teacher or an administrator gets information that a student may have drugs in his car and they got a reason to search it and they find drugs, they bring it to our attention, then we'll go through at that point. That's when we'll get involved, but we don't direct the searching. It goes back to, New Jersey versus TLO, which discusses and covers the reasonableness of searches in schools and administrators. And so that's not directed by us. It's purely a school issue. If they come across something, then they'll include us in a conversation. We can decide where it goes from there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your history and your work on this too.
I appreciate it.
Okay. I have two questions, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but how will the DARE program, you said it was cut because of funding. How are you envisioning the funding?
Right now, what we're looking at is we have an actual officer who did DARE. This time, what we're looking at right now is we have two of our SROs are DARE instructed, Chris Johnson and June Sacchetti. And the initial thought right now is that they would execute that program at the elementary schools or wherever we decide to have it, kind of setting up a schedule where it doesn't impact their responsibilities at the other schools as well, too, at that much. So the idea is to use, then that gives them an opportunity to make contact with the young kids, and then they'll know somebody when they come into the school next year, too.
Okay, great. I have kids who have just recently graduated from the schools, and I still have a 9th grader, and so I've seen the DARE program in different ways and been a parent at those DARE graduations, and I too value it, and I'm glad that it's being redone as well. So appreciate that. Not seeing any other questions, so I just want to thank all of you for being here. My sister was a police officer, and a lot of her work was in the schools up in Warroad, Minnesota. So I appreciate the service that you provide, not only in the community, but in our schools. So thank you so much for being here, and Brenda, thank you so much for being here to give testimony to the relationship building. Yeah.
And I just want to say, I appreciate you having us come and just kind of outline what we do and kind of getting the true scope of what we do is. I'll leave a couple business cards here too, so if you guys have questions, you can always get a hold of me and just we'll talk through it.
One other last thing that I think about just sitting here is we need to do a better job even in our school of informing our parents as the role of the resource officer. Because I don't think our parents all know what the purpose is and what they really do on a day-to-day basis. So that might be something all our middle schools and high schools need to think about too.
That's a great thought, and I hope that we can make sure it's consistent across the district in how we're doing it in terms of informing parents and building those relationships with parents as well. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. The next item on our agenda is the secondary schedule review process, and Dr. Michael Carey, again, the director of our curriculum and instruction, is going to guide us on this item.
So mostly really what you need to know is just there in that little paragraph, but I'll reiterate it, and if you have questions, be available for that. Long story short is that I think I shared a draft process with all of you a few months back on kind of a timeline and different parties that may or may not be involved and pieces that would be implemented to gather feedback from the community on their desires around schedules, have some internal conversation on what different schedule options look like and the impacts of those schedules, and then ultimately go back out for community feedback to bring a recommendation forward to the board this next school year. And so I just wanted to let you know that we are making forward progress on that. We shared an electronic survey with students, parents, and staff. I think we got very good responses, in my opinion, from the parent group. We had over 1,000 parents take the survey, and so excellent response rate, and it was only open, I think, for 10 days. So a 10-day window, and to get 1,000 parents from the community, I was happy with that response rate. So part of that is that information is being shared with the task force that we're pulling together. That task force is looking at the results, talking about things like, have we heard sufficient feedback? Are we confident that we've been able to hear feedback from all of our stakeholder groups in our community? Are there other ways we still need to gather information? So we're having those conversations through that task force group. We have convened that task force that I had outlined we would convene in the draft. We have principal from each building participating, central office staff, and I think it's 3 teacher reps from each building participating in that process. We're starting off with a review of research articles and best practice around scheduling, taking a look at that survey data, and then starting to have conversation about the pros and cons of different schedule options. So our next meeting is actually scheduled for June 20th. Coming up next week, and we're going to have some conversation about one of the research articles that we shared, and also conversation about the results from the survey and next steps moving forward. So just wanted to provide that update to you, and we'll continue to provide updates kind of periodically as we move forward through the process.
Okay, great. Thanks for the update. Any questions? Okay, Member Oswald?
What levels were the survey offered to? Was it district-wide? Was it only certain grades?
Secondary, so it was middle school and high school.
Okay.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. By looking at the surveys, did you get a sense of where they were coming from across town? I mean, kind of the breakdown?
So we didn't ask that question. Basically, we asked, what's your role within the organization? Are you parent, student, administrator, or teacher? And we didn't differentiate in terms of what school you attend. So to be honest, we don't have information about whether you're from any particular part of town.
Okay. Member Harla?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm glad that you're taking it from a research base and looking at evidence base to build it. I think it's smart. There's so much, we always hear about so much that's coming around, and if we have a chance to rebuild this opportunity moving forward, taking it from that evidence based is great. So thanks for your work on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you for bringing that up, Member Harla. Member Oswald?
I know part of what was involved in this discussion was some financial implications of, can we do it cheaper and better? Are you finding that in your exploration of different schedules that there are cheaper options out there, or have you gone that far yet? Is it still early?
That's where I was going to go. It's too early in the process to go there. I've found some really good background information on the costs of different schedule options, but as a committee, we haven't gotten to that level of conversation to talk that part through.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks for the update. And again, more background information was on, starting on page 18 on that. The next item is Head Start status updates on a couple items. And so, welcome Pam Rees, Head Start Director. Thank you, and thank you again for a wonderful dinner with Head Start families a few weeks back. It was fun dancing. Yeah.
On the computer? Okay. I just thought maybe.
Yeah.
on the agenda, the first thing is the URSEA fiscal review. We had several reviews this past year, and it's our duty to update all of you on that. Our first one was URSEA, which is really our enrollment selection process, and they combined that with a fiscal review, and there were 0 findings on that review. Okay, that's very good. Yes, that is a woohoo. Then the class review is class is a tool that's used to observe a classroom and teacher practices, and in the world of Head Start, what you want is to be above the nationwide lowest 10% of the scores in class. And based on where we landed after this review in March, I would say we're in a good place, and we won't have worries about being under the lowest 10%. So that's another, cross your fingers, but I think we're good. Then the most fun was the environmental health and safety review that we had. And there were a couple of findings there. They had concerns about the age appropriateness of our playground. And also trash cans that did not have covers on them. So we remedied these things. We now have step-on or swing-away trash cans that kids are having a good time with. And we also, in conjunction with facilities, got signage up at all the playgrounds that talks about what is appropriate for kids under 5. So with those 2 things corrected, we had a phone follow-up review, and there are no further actions required there. Okay, so then we're on a roll. So we submitted a transportation waiver. And the waiver was to allow 4-year-old students to ride the school district buses without child restraint systems and bus monitors. And that helps us with children who are enrolled under voluntary pre-K, but also actually any school readiness, voluntary pre-K or Head Start child is able to ride the bus from corner stops to school as long as they're 4. Okay, so we have a 1-year waiver on transportation. And then in this section of the agenda, I would like to share with you our outcomes from this past year. And these outcomes are school readiness and Head Start combined. And so we had 3 classrooms where that was the case. And let's see if I know how will I, arrows? Okay, so we're going to look at these areas, and this was also presented to our families and other folks at our Head Start parent dinner. So we're looking at the 5 areas that we collect information on: approaches to learning, social and emotional development, language and literacy, cognition, and perceptual, motor, and physical development. Okay? I think the best thing are these photos are amazing. So what we want to see is that we want to see a lot of green. So we start out the year, and our graphs, you'll see that in some places kids are just learning. They're putting down roots. In the yellow, they're in process. And in the green, we have a lot of green by the end of the school year. So our first area is perceptual, motor, and physical development. And I will tell you that that is always an area where our kids get high scores. And I think, just my belief about it is that it comes from all of a sudden they have preschool experience. And so they make very fast progress. And here are those numbers. Ooh, that doesn't show up so well. It was larger in another, but at any rate, where we start off with kids' physical and development and health, 34% in the fall, and then it doubles to 77%. So a lot of green by the time they get to spring. And approaches to learning, that's about focus, attention, persistence, self-regulation. You can see the other areas there. And that too, tremendous growth, doubled, more than doubled their growth. There you go, that's a better picture, yeah. Okay. It's not quite the color, but it's kind of weird. You really want to be sure in this lesson that you introduce blowing out instead of sucking in, because otherwise it's not such a great day. And this is, I think, an award-winning photograph here. Isn't that just cool? And in the world, yes. Pardon me? Yes, taken by a staff person. So, in the world of early childhood, most of us think the most important learning a child can do is in the area of social emotional development. So, we'll show you where we're at there. Look at that. Well, it's actually orange here, but anyway, again, more. I know, isn't that weird? Okay, so more than doubled once again. And this little boy is holding up a card that is part of a solution kit that kids are learning about with the pyramid model. And so they're making deals with each other and solving problems with these cards that they really understand what they mean. So instead of snatching a toy away from a friend, they make a deal. Can we trade? Or if someone is bugging them, there's a card that says, ignore. I'm ignoring you. Leave me alone. So it's pretty cool stuff happening in the area of social emotional development. Language and literacy, our curriculum is really focused on literacy, and we do a lot of work in this area. So let's see where we ended up. Look at that, off the charts. It's looking really good. I think the area that we see the most opportunity for growth, and we just had our training and technical assistance consultant with us last week, and looking at these scores, and think that the area that we'll focus on the most next year will be just cognition and general knowledge. And Head Start has afforded folks an opportunity to introduce coaching into the program, and so we will have coaching, which I think will help us with those scores in this area. Okay, and the next slide is, that's all areas of school readiness combined. And we're at 72%, starting at 34% for proficient. So, you should see this next slide because you're noted here that it takes a village, and thanking all of you for your help to get us there. Okay? Thank you, Jack. Having my back. Jack has my back. Okay, and I have other items, but I can wait until, or do whatever it is you want to do.
Do you have other items later in here?
Yeah,
Yes,
she
I have
does.
approval items, but I'm happy to wait and take my turn.
Yeah, why don't we first see if there's any questions on these items, and
Okay.
then let me just look again where you're at on the agenda. We might just go ahead and have you, we appreciate your time that you've already been here. Does anyone have any questions on the items that were presented so far?
I just have one comment to make.
Okay, go ahead.
I know I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the communications and phone calls that I know my office has received and your office has received. I think there was a misunderstanding that because we are attempting to blend programs, that it's eliminating slots and there's restricting access to our early childhood programs. And so I know your office has done a really nice job of helping to communicate accurate information and look at, with some increased funding that we think is going to be coming forward from the legislature now, that's been finalized, that we'll be able to expand classrooms in those areas that need it. So just wanted to thank you. I know that you fielded a lot of phone calls and
Thank you for that, and I will say that I have spoken to a lot of parents, and I think most of them feel like they've been heard, and we are working to address concerns they have. And I think, that it's been a lot of learning this year, and that we could have done a better job explaining the different way that we're going to do enrollment. And so, folks who were around 3-4 years ago and then they have another child think that it's still the same, and why wouldn't they think that? Because we didn't communicate anything different. So I've let folks know that, we took that in and we'll make the appropriate changes so that the communication's better.
Okay. Great. Thanks for recommending or for informing us that you have gotten a lot of calls on it. I know that when the new booklets came out, where kind of the blended registration was on there, that I got a few questions on it just from parents I know out in the community, and I think people have really liked that kind of one-stop kind of registration approach. But I think it also brought up questions that as we move forward. I just want to recognize also that Member Harla serves as the liaison for Head Start now, and I had the opportunity to do it, and I appreciate what you reviewed with us, knowing that it was reviewed so thoroughly with the parents that serve on the governing board as well, and appreciate you involving some members on the review process with the federal folks and the phone calls and that, and just really tying us in. And I know Member Harla and Member Kirby have been involved with that as well, so appreciate that continued use of us as well as us being able to learn more about the Head Start program. So,
thank you. We've really appreciated your help. Okay.
So, no, Pam is on. If we look just a little bit further on action items, and I think we can go ahead and have you do that, Pam. And so if everyone can go, the information that follows up with these action items are on page 67 and 68. And why don't you just move forward there.
The first item is the state Head Start grant for next year. We saw a slight increase because the state allocation is based on the federal allocation, and because many programs got additional funds for this coming year, it gave us a bump of about $22,000. Our state grant pays for a collaboration with the YWCA Child Care Center in Spirit Valley. We provide a teacher advocate there year-round who serves 18 families and supports the staff, works as the advocate, providing parent engagement opportunities, monthly parent meetings, and like I said, really helps coach the staff who are working on their qualifications. And then we also have an option called Families in Transition, and much like the K-12 Families in Transition, we have 2 staff who are working with families experiencing homelessness, and they are working out of the Washington Center and doing a terrific job. They also have some responsibilities to do what we call a socialization. It's really a group meeting with parents and kids, and they are teaming up with our 3rd option in the state grant, which is our home-based option. And we added that because we knew that there were families in town who, for many reasons, were not able to access the other early childhood options through Head Start. And I'm struggling because we're trying to move to early childhood, but some things are still Head Start, and so it's stumbling a little, but pretty soon it'll just roll off my tongue. So we started a home-based program serving 12 families, and those folks meet monthly with the Families in Transition folks and are doing a beautiful job together, providing activities for families. The other thing is that a portion of our wages for folks who are working program-wide, meaning in the federal and state sides of our program, portion of their wages come out of this grant. So it's been submitted. Mr. Kirby signed it, and we're moments from acceptance. It's a pretty smooth process.
So board members, at our board meeting, it's recommended that we accept and approve the above items, so we'll be voting on that. So just a heads up on that. And then Pam is going to go over the second item, which is the Head Start federal COLA, cost of living adjustment, which we will also be approving next week. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay. So we happily received this letter saying that we are eligible for a $19,394 cost of living allowance. And because we had already submitted our federal grant, we had already accommodated what we assumed may be the increases based on past practices of settling contracts. We were able to accommodate this 1% increase. And so if you can do that and you're showing that everybody in your program is receiving a permanent increase, then you can use the funds to offset increased costs in other areas. So we looked at our areas of greatest need and increased the number of weeks of our mental health consultant by 4. We have very old and slow computers, and so we are updating our computers. We also have a few of those in our federal grant, so we should be in good shape after we receive these funds. And we have a lot going on with our blending classrooms, and so we upped our classroom supply budget and then threw a little money into our phone contract because we had $146 left. And phones are getting more expensive, so that's what we're going to do with the COLA, with your approval.
Any questions, board members, on this? Okay. Okay, well, just, again, Pam, thank you for your great work. We're really lucky to have your leadership with our Head Start programs, and thank you so much. Oh, Annie?
So you said phone contract, as in like cell phone contract?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
yes.
sorry.
Many of our staff I'm sorry, many of our staff have cell phones provided by the program, so, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly, so.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Mhm.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words. Appreciate your support.
We will go back then on the agenda, and we are to B, grant partnerships with Duluth Public Schools, which we do each month. And do you want to review them? Or did you?
Say what it is?
I can do it too. But. Okay. No, go ahead. Okay. No,
That's okay. I just haven't looked at it real closely in the last couple of minutes, and so I had to refresh myself. The Carl Perkins Career and Technical Education Grant, we do have a Lake Superior consortium that helps oversee that. We are the fiscal host for those funds and have historically been. And so, and that's in conjunction with Lake Superior College, who tends to be the regional partner on the post-secondary side. And so they are applying for the grant funds listed there under B1.
The next item is specific to Stowe. I know that our principal out at Stowe, Cynthia Maldonado, has been trying to reinvigorate the environmental science work that has happened in previous years, and so this is an opportunity that is being written in partnership with UMD to begin some programming out there specific to some STEM work and environmental work. And I think it was member.
okay, excellent. And $74,401. That's great. Would that be implemented next fall if awarded?
I believe that's the plan.
Okay, Member Welty?
Does Stowe still have the red worms, or have they?
Yes, they do.
Good.
And I get my worm juice when I need it. Yes.
I got a big slug of that, and my poor wife was so grossed out.
Yes. All right, I'm going to keep going. If
Yep,
that's okay?
go ahead.
Oh, the next one's a Brad. Do you know what that's about?
Not really, but I think I do vaguely. We should have invited Mr. Beets to be here tonight.
Yeah.
So you can see that C1 is a grant submitted by Brad Beets, our vocational program coordinator, for the purpose of looking into options for pro-start industry curriculum that would help support our culinary programs. Long story short, I think you can sum up many of these grant requests and that Brad is very proactive in trying to find additional resources to support our CTE programs, understanding that oftentimes our career and technical education programs tend to be some of our more costly programs that we offer.
Okay, the next item is specific to Merritt Creek. There is a grant proposal to purchase LLI, which has been something that we have been adopting some of our schools to support MTSS. So they are looking at a grant to provide that. The next item is specific. I believe this next item is an annual request. Is that correct? Yep. So this is an annual request to support a leadership forum, and then number 4 is a Head Start request to support some outdoor gear to support preschool classrooms.
And just a reminder, all of those items are informational. Any questions? Okay, and then D, regulations.
So, on page 65, you have the one change that is going to be reflected in the family and student handbook. We'll get you a copy of the entire student handbook. We have a committee that meets on an annual basis. This year there was no recommendations for any significant changes except for the part I'm about to mention. On page 65, there was some dialogue that happened this fall that began at some of our QSC and QLT meetings regarding our current athletic eligibility process. Concerns were raised by teachers, coaches, and administrators regarding our current eligibility standings. When eligibility for our district was compared to those, the eligibility of other districts across the state of Minnesota, our eligibility was compared to populations that were very different than ours, such as I get Breck and Blake confused, but I remember it was a private school that started with a B. And some other some other schools had some similar eligibility criteria that were of a very different demographics than us. As we took a look at our the regional area and other districts surrounding us, we felt that there needed to be a discussion around revising our athletic eligibility to be more in line with what the Minnesota State High School League has outlined in their general guidelines for eligibility. Their general guidelines for eligibility is students need to be making progress towards graduation. Our students not only need to be making progress towards graduation, but holding a specific GPA. In addition to our standards being much higher than many of our surrounding districts, it was also very difficult to manage. You had to literally hand calculate GPAs for individual students when you were monitoring whether students were eligible for athletics mid-quarter, because those needed to be hand calculated. So what you have before you is a proposal, or this is our recommendation moving forward. Like I said, we've worked with teachers, principals, athletic directors, teachers, principals, athletic directors, myself, to come up with this eligibility criteria. We would like to move forward with the recommendation that students who receive an F become immediately ineligible for athletics, and at mid-quarter, upon passing all of their classes, they will redeem eligibility. If they are ineligible again, that lengthens their ineligibility criteria or period for another extended period of time. We did a calculation to find out how many students were ineligible with our current standing versus our current eligibility requirements versus this new proposed eligibility requirements, and actually more students would be ineligible under this criteria with a lesser standard, because students have been able to navigate the system where they've learned that if I just maintain this GPA, I'm eligible. However, that maintaining that GPA has allowed them to receive an F. So for example, a student could have all C's and a D and not be eligible to participate, versus a student who has all C's and an F, that student would not be eligible to participate. So that's a little bit of the difference there. Our hope is that this is a greater motivator to address some of our areas where we have some of the highest numbers of failing courses at the secondary level. And again, this is just high school. This is Minnesota State High School League.
Okay. Board Member Welty and then Board Member Oswald.
I'd have to say my father would approve of this because my tennis career came to an end when I got a D in chemistry. How much of this is new? Is it just the A, or is the entire eligibility sheet roughly new?
What's new is the no F, so the ineligibility status. In the past, you could have a GPA that was below 2.0 and you went on a probationary period. In this criteria, you become immediately ineligible with an F. The mid-quarter only allows for you to redeem your status. So you don't become ineligible at mid-quarter. You only become ineligible at those quarter breaks when the grading periods happen. Mid-quarter allows students to redeem themselves to become eligible again. So what's different is you become immediately ineligible as well as how you become re-eligible.
Member Oswald?
I have a couple of concerns about that. Speaking from a parental perspective, knowing that I have a student that received an F on her report card that she didn't deserve, and that would have immediately kicked her out of her robotics eligibility. And yet, when it was made up 2 weeks later or whatever, and everything was corrected and things. And I know the reasons that she received the failing grade contributed more to her emotional health and her inability to cope with that. Then being kicked off robotics because of a mistake and things weren't followed. And I'm not necessarily faulting anybody but my daughter. But yet, that would have caused her more stress to lose that position in an extremely unhelpful time in her life. So from a board member's perspective, is there an appeal process built into this somehow that I've missed? Because there are extenuating circumstances in there. It's not an absolute, and kids make mistakes. Miscommunication happens between kids and teachers. Teachers may be more likely to give you an F and change the grade rather than give you an incomplete. Are incompletes addressed in here? Are those treated as an F? I guess lots of those questions.
Good questions. One thing to remember, this only prevents you from competition. The ineligibility does not, you are still allowed to practice and be with the team. This is only for actual competitions, as seen by the Minnesota State High School League. There is a administrative prerogative in here.
Okay.
I would say in a situation like that, I would call a meeting with the AD, the principal, and the teacher to resolve that issue immediately, to address, because there's ramifications of that student not being able to participate. So that's how I would handle that as a principal.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. I think that's especially important given our robotics teams have one competition, maybe two.
Right.
Total.
Right.
So a mess up, they miss everything because they're usually only a week or two apart. And so that concerns me greatly. My other question is, being that this was the only update that was, considered changeable, with the recent news about inappropriate clothing wear, has that discussion happened, and will there be other changes in the future related to that?
Good question. There were a couple considerations this spring about some issues that have happened in our schools that make it difficult to interpret the handbook. However, our handbook is outlined to align to what we call DERS, which is the website or the data tool that we use to align our referrals to MDE. We have to submit data on an annual basis to MDE about the number of behavior referrals and what they were for and the consequences. So our handbook is aligned to how MDE has outlined what the incidents are. So those things have been aligned. But specific to dress code, there was a recommendation by the administration to keep the dress code the same way.
Will there be clarification on perhaps how to handle those incidents in the future rather than en masse?
Sure. I did meet, I met with Ordine students. They had a win period and they invited me to their win period. So we talked through the handbook and we talked through what's the proper process. If policy changes needed and required, what would be that proper process to follow? It was a wonderful experience to be able to be one-on-one or working with those kids and talking through that. They had lots of interesting ideas. And so we tried to identify what is a proper process for addressing those concerns. So we talked through that, and I felt it went well.
And I'm speaking more from how you approach a student that is in violation.
Sure.
And so I really hope those procedures are clarified and respect kids in more private situations rather than out in the open. I think that's only fair.
We also talked about why dress code policy exists and why it does not. So there was some misunderstandings as well. And I think our staff probably need to be consistent with that message too, because I think some kids had some different messages. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Talked about uniforms, right?
We talked about uniforms. I didn't want to go there.
Okay, great. Member Harla?
It's actually, I'm a huge proponent of uniforms. When I taught in Chicago, it was a really big unifier, so really helpful. I wanted to just talk about the eligibility piece. And I had to step out for a brief moment, but I'm glad that it is just a really clear thing versus kind of being able to play a game where you could get down to like a D, and that students really have an expectation that graduation is the expectation, not just playing the game to do just well enough to stay in. And so, and then also there could be some side conversations. The last policy made it seem like kids might be able to talk their way in or out of different things. So I like that in a circumstance like Member Oswald brought up, that's very specific, that there is conversation, but it's very clear from the beginning that students just know it, and it's not like, oh, here's this or that, and they're not having to play games with different teachers trying to figure out different things. It's just kind of that is set. So I was when it was brought up at agenda setting, I've been thinking a lot about it because I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to disproportionately affect XYZ, but then I thought, no, it's just setting a standard that here's what our expectation is. And then one question is, when it comes to coaches, I know in college settings, they often check on and have like group study times, or they set and that's not college, I know it's high school. But do coaches know of academic resources where they can send students in the school so they're another referral point? It's just an idea. So teachers know where they would send students, but oftentimes a coach is that safe relationship. So could they also be provided with a list of who they talk to? Maybe.
I can't answer that question about how they, if they do know the resources, but I know as a former principal, when I was dealing with the situation around behavior or grades, sometimes the coaches are my most valuable assets. And so they sometimes have a little more motivation than I do as a principal. And so that's always helpful to have that partnership with the coach.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I just wanted to comment a couple of things as a parent as well. As I think it's really good that, and my kids have been very active in a lot of different activities while they were in school, that there are clear, that it's more clear. I also appreciated that you highlighted that, and I hope it's highlighted well, when the policies are being reviewed, whether it's by the coaches or by staff at the start of the year, that you can still practice and be involved. It's really about competing in the competition piece of whatever kids are involved with. So I'm glad that's clear. I also just wanted to mention that, and this is more for background, that we reviewed this handbook since Annie and I have been on the board, so I'm not surprised that, because it was so reviewed just within the last few years, that there were only new pieces, or this one piece brought to it, so just kind of for background. Please thank the committee that met and brought this recommendation forward for us. And then my last question is, are we still going to be sending the parent handbook by mail?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's really important. Okay, any other questions?
I will also, each fall I meet with both East High School and Denfeld High School families and students, along with the the ADs, and this will be part of my communications to those large groups as well in August.
Go ahead.
If there's a student that had an F this fall or this spring,
that's addressed in the eligibility.
Okay.
We're still maintaining 2.0 going into the fall.
Okay.
Because that's new.
Thanks. I must have missed it. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, we are going to move on then to, we already did the Head Start action items, so we're now on policies, and it's the first reading on the wellness policy, and if you want to just
All right,
go
I'm
through
really
these two.
excited. So I'm really excited. We're all going to have consensus here, and it's going to go well. Yeah, okay. I know. I can wish. I know. All right, this is exciting. So, as you know, we brought the wellness policy, our wellness committee. We've been really trying to formalize that group, and one of our first tasks in the last 18 months has been we have to look at updating our current district policy. Our committee's done tons and tons of work, and Josh Gorham has just done a fantastic job leading that group and has put tons of time in, so I truly appreciate his work on this. We put a draft together because there was no draft policy by MDE or MSBA last year, so we did our best to follow those guidelines and draft something. We brought that to you earlier this winter. We were asked to go back and revise that. In that process, MSBA came out with a model policy. So that was actually very positive that we did pause on that adoption. So we were able to look at that MSBA policy. What you have on page 74 is the MSBA policy with the committee's recommendations for additions or deletions. And I want to draw your attention to page 78 because I think page 78 specifically addresses the concerns that were raised earlier this winter with our first draft. One of the concerns that were raised is that parents who provide food to classrooms are held to the same guidelines as school staff when it comes to selling, providing that food or beverages to students. So under D1, you'll notice it says here that student wellness will be a consideration for all foods offered, but not sold to students in the school campus. Caution should be exercised when offering foods that may cause allergic reactions or adverse impacts to students with health conditions. And it talks specifically about celebrations and classroom snacks. So specifically, a celebration or party is a special and enjoyable event like birthdays. We had to define what that was. The school district will provide a list of healthy party ideas to families and staff, including non-food celebration ideas. It does not restrict. However, I'll give the example of a parent providing Oreos to a classroom. So, yes, yeah. So that is, again, the hope and the intent, the intent behind this policy is we need to recognize that we are influential in being able to help students learn healthy choices and habits, and we have a role in supporting that. However, we do not place our value system on our students and our families, and our students and families still have the opportunity to do those things. But we will be, as a district, will be more intentional about providing ideas that are alternatives to food for incentives, as well as other opportunities that might be used. So there'll be some education on the front end of this as well.
Thank you. Superintendent Grunstadt, do you need an Oreo?
Maybe.
Okay.
Energy's feeling a little low.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Maybe some M&Ms instead.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. Go ahead.
I'm going to B4, as in before.
Which B4?
Yeah.
Schools will strive. It's on page 76. Before, I took out the strive to before, and I would change punishment to behavioral consequence. I'd like to totally reword it, but,
We can work through that. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, yeah.
Yep.
I guess what I'm thinking, I might as well say what I'm thinking is that if outdoor play or recess was going to be withheld as a behavioral consequence, that it would be only in situations where
yes, specific to recess.
Right, like if there was an issue at recess, it wouldn't be you didn't bring your homework, therefore you're not going out to play, because then that's not it doesn't make sense. And that I think that the play in the recess time is important to their academic success as well. So, if it's because they're not playing safely or because there was some other issue that would lead us to believe that they couldn't successfully participate in recess, that would be appropriate, but that it would only be used as a consequence when appropriate to the behavior that was displayed.
We'll tweak that.
Will you make that change then for next week?
Do you want it for next Tuesday then? That would be the right time, right?
Or this is the first reading, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily, yeah. Okay, Member Harla and then Member Oswald.
The wording, what was the wording that you just used again?
Behavior consequence instead of punishment
No, we changed it.
was one of the.
I'll change some verbiage in there about the specific consequences for recess will be connected to recess if that were the case.
Or
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There are times that it wouldn't be necessarily attached to recess, but if it were, if they're somehow being a danger to themselves or others, or it would create an unsafe situation to have them out there. There are other reasons, but I just don't want it to be a unrelated event.
Yep. Thanks. I'm encouraged by this coming through. I know that from being one of the members sitting on the Wellness Committee, I'm just so thankful for the committee and support on this. I sat through there was a webinar that MSBA held last week I know that we all had gotten an email on it from MSBA's leader newsletter or whatever, and it was helpful to hear that even though there had been a repeal at the USDA level of some of this, that all the way through they're still continuing with the guidelines because states have adopted them, and so I'm just really glad to know that that's continuing. And I also I like how it doesn't feel like shaming language in item D, and provides an opportunity for family. And I think so much of this too, as a part of the Wellness Committee, a lot of what we talked about was educational opportunities and how we're communicating healthy opportunities for families. So just excited about this, and I'm glad to see that it's come forward.
Member Harla, you just mentioned something, and I didn't get to listen to that webinar. And how many states have adopted? Do you about?
All states had. So I can't speak as an authority on this because all states had to have adopted something. We're supposed to have this actually in practice by June 30th of this year, but MD. Because the MSBA took so long to do their model policy, MDE was okay with, if we're in the process of working on it, we kind of check off the box, and then they'll be coming in and they'll check all the different things that we are in line with what's going on with these standards. So they're tied to our food service reviews. So.
Thank you for clarifying that again. Okay. Member Welty, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Member Oswald?
I like the new verbiage. There's just one point that was missed. Cookie sales at the high school level that is sold during lunch to supplement student IEP goals and funding for those specific things that are a huge success at Denfeld. I'm sure they are at East, and if they fell under D3 of fundraising, they would not be able to continue. And so how can they allow that? I'm in a place where I know how vital this money is to their program, that if we were to eliminate their chance to sell this, I would need to be reassured we'll give them the money to replace it, because it's that important.
So in talking to Pam Bowe, that's out of our control, that's specific requirements that MDE places on us, that any food sold during the school day has to be in alignment with USDA guidelines. So that's even above and beyond the policy. That's part of what she's required to make sure happens. So that actually was cited when they did their review early this year. That is my understanding, that those need to be in compliance because they are sold to students during the school day. The fundraising piece on D3 is specific also to anything that students sell. I'll use the candy bar sales as a good example. Students cannot sell candy bars during the school day as part of a fundraiser to students. And so again, that's another thing that would not be allowed under this policy. But again, the policy is in alignment with what we're required to do in that respect. We will work to provide opportunities and educational materials. So for those who are using who want to have alternatives to those types of fundraisers, will have resources available to them for other fundraising options. But for those specific fundraising initiatives, we will not be able to do that during the school day. That's my understanding.
So how, Superintendent, can we replace that money for them? Because that's vital, especially for that specific group of kids.
Well, and I know that they weren't as popular. They could choose to sell the cookies that do meet the nutritional standards, or they could make a different choice that wasn't cookies that would meet the nutritional standard. If it was the whole grains, or could they do the same thing making popcorn because that's a whole grain, or could it be some other item that they make that would meet the standards?
Well, my concern is that this was a significant amount of money each day. I believe it was $250 a day they earned in selling cookies, which is a huge amount. Is there a way that we can give them a set amount of money, and then whatever they fundraise, they just pay back to that fund? I mean, to guarantee that they have a minimum to work with, because you switch to popcorn or whatever it is, you don't know if you're going to earn that same amount of money. And this is a consistent thing that they can count on every day. So I'm just speaking up for those students that are most challenged in their education, and I want to make sure that we can provide their education and get them ready for the world beyond us.
Well, I'd say that anything is possible, and all the money in the world is all the money in the world, so it's got to come from somewhere. I would really suggest exploring what, they could do things like survey students, find out what would they like to have as a snack during the day, or what would they be interested in buying, and that too could be a learning experience.
Sure. I just would like them to have a safeguard in the transition. I don't want to cut off their hand, just all of a sudden. They were really hoping they could still sell cookies. I know that. So I think we need to communicate with them and give them some safeguards to help them along until they can transition to something else.
A few questions that I would have is exactly how much money is being raised. What are they doing with the money being raised? And can we look at alternatives to what they have been currently doing for those fundraising? And if those things need to be addressed, we'll problem solve that with them. And I'm looking to Jason because I'm thinking this is probably through our work experience program that we probably need to have those conversations, and whether there's other funding sources that they could be tapping into, that could be something we could be investigating. So I've taken note of it, and I'm looking to Mr. Crane here for us to problem solve this outside of this meeting, and we'll be in touch, okay?
Okay. Member Welty, and then Member Harla.
Just to follow up on that, the MDE is requiring us to honor federal rules. What is the penalty for not paying attention to this particular rule?
I know this now because I asked the same question. The process, my understanding in talking to Pam, the process is they come in, they do their review. Coming in and looking at that review, they find a violation. It's up to the school district to create a corrective action plan. That corrective action plan is then monitored within a certain period of time. And if you are not in compliance after the corrective action plan is in place, you are fined. And they've become more and more diligent about those fines.
Do we have anecdotal information about how that diligence has been applied to other school districts in our area?
I don't know that.
We used to have a lot of vending machines and soda pop and things like that, and I know that when I was on the board in the old days, the principals came in and begged us not to remove vending machines, and we had a member who pointed out the difficulties of all the sugary corn syrup pop that we sold. Somehow it strikes me that the federal enforcement of the cookie sales in this particular instance is kind of an unfortunate overreach. Is there any possibility of selling cookies that would be consumed, that could be consumed outside of the school day?
My understanding, the way it reads, is anything sold during the school day. Which would be
could they sell things before or after the school day?
I believe so. Like we have concession stands that happen after school and other things that happen after school. So yes, they could sell them at sporting events.
Could they take orders during the school day for the students to pick up before or after?
Superintendent Grunset wants to comment.
I would rather comply with the federal restrictions and not try to work around them, especially when we have been cited in an audit for this topic.
Could you give me some background on that citing?
We can provide you with the documentation.
You know, can I jump in here for a minute? Member Welty, I was a pretty active parent when you were on the school board last time, and I was part of the parent group that advocated vending machines out of the schools, and so I know it's something that a lot of parents supported back at the time. And I think as we've been talking about this wellness policy, one of the things we are hearing from a lot of parents of my generation and the newer younger parents coming in is that healthy lifestyles is something we need to be looking at and that are important to parents. And in my work life, I work with a lot of foster teenage girls who and boys who deal with weight issues. And so, you know, I love this concept, and I certainly know the people I work with would love the concept of the schools supporting alternative sales of products. And again, we've discussed this many times already, but there are plenty of healthy choices and alternatives, and I think for that reason, as well as compliance reasons, that I look forward to changes with this particular item in this policy.
Can I just address that question
Sure.
last time?
Mm-hmm.
I just pulled up the email that Pam had given me when I had asked the question, and it is Regulation 7 CFR 210.18, letter K. This is in reference to being under the guidance of USDA. It says if corrective action is not followed, fiscal action is determined as a form, or fiscal action will be determined, and then it says that the Food and Nutrition Service does have the latitude to impose fiscal action for repeat or egregious violations. So that's what I know.
Can you send that out so that everyone can read it? Member Oswald, you're next.
I'm all for promoting healthy lifestyles, and I do think that we need to have a policy such as this. But I also think we're undercutting our high schoolers' ability to make decisions and choices out in the real world, especially when seniors can go and leave campus and they're going out into the world making, poor and healthy choices, going to Arby's or going to Herberts and Gerberts or Subway, and having a salad or, 2 burgers or whatever Arby's sells. I don't even know. Sorry. So I think we're selling their ability to choose short by forcing this on them from the federal government. I understand the needs to do this, whether I agree with them or not. And I also just like to wonder what the administration would say if the special ed groups would decide to sell Diet Pop. As I know, the speech team has sold pop at adult events, and I know I've purchased my fair share because in a school it's a pop desert, and I am inclined to have a Diet Coke or a Diet Mountain Dew at a time. So would that be an acceptable alternative in your view, knowing that is a diet soda, a 12-ounce can of diet soda is a smart snack?
I wouldn't advocate for diet soda because soda has its own issues too, although I do appreciate a Diet Mountain Dew, as you know I do as well. I think that if we're getting to the spirit of the conversation, I think we all value what is lovingly known as Cookie Club, and we know that it is a great activity for teaching and for learning, but also for the social aspect of it, really building relationships, and of course there's the funding piece as well. And if we want to continue that spirit of what's going on, the relationship building, the learning that's going on, I think there are other ways to get there rather than selling the cookies. If the nutritionally acceptable recipe isn't going to work, then I am confident that our creative staff can find another product that is going to help serve the same pieces. I do know that we heard from a lot of people last time we were discussing the wellness policy, both in support of it for parents who have children who struggle with maintaining their diet to go along with their diabetes, or for other reasons, if they're just really being mindful of healthful options. We heard a lot of people in support of that. We heard some people say also that, I'd rather give them a treat myself rather than have that happen at school. I know at high school it's a whole different level. I know that when I went in high school, if we want to talk personal stories, when I was in high school, I believe it was the Danish bakery sold honeymooner donuts, the kind chocolate covered with the cream in the center. Yeah, and I loved those. But you know what? If I ate one of those at break every single day, maybe that's how I got to the unhealthy size I was and through most of my high school career. Some quick math tells me that if I bought those cookies every day, which you get 2 in a bag, it's 1,600 calories for the week. And that's a lot of calories that if we were making another choice, a healthier choice, you could still have a treat and have it be a little bit healthier. But I go back to if it's the spirit of it's a learning activity, it's something that other kids like to receive, and it builds relationships, I think we can find something other than cookies to do that with.
Member Harla?
Yeah, I like what you're talking about with the spirit of this, that I think we could start spending time in minutia of different things, and I want to make sure, I'm really glad to hear that administration will work to ensure that there's a transition process. I mean, even things like the Seeds of Success makes fruit bits, for example. Mm-hmm. It's like local food that, they're almost like fruit roll-ups, but it's local fruit. I don't know. They're really good, actually. Have you been to Lincoln Park Farmers Market? Anyway, there's just a lot of different opportunities we can have. But I had a specific question on here. On item V, page 79 and, page 80. Sorry, not V. Item 6. 6C. So the wellness coordinator, who is the designated wellness coordinator for the district that will track this?
I believe that's Assistant Superintendent Amy Starzecki.
Yeah. Josh has been leading our wellness committee, so he's been kind of... Josh has been leading that, but I have been maybe co-leading that.
Yeah. I just think it's important that there's somebody that has
a
paycheck and expectations from the school district that's doing that. And it was interesting, when I started on the school board asking about those wellness policy, and I was put on the wellness committee, and it was supposed to have been meeting for a long time, and I kept saying, so when is this going to actually meet? And knowing that it statutorily needed to meet, and it wasn't, it was always concerning, and it kind of got batted back and forth with different folks. So I'm glad to know that there's an administrative position connected, so it's not just Pam having to worry about it from her position, because in the past, she was kind of the one that would encourage things. So
Doug and I have been at the meetings, but Josh, as a SHIP coordinator, has really been leading that group and helps to put the agendas together. So internally, it's me, but Josh has been key.
Yeah, perfect. Just want to double check that we have
Okay, a couple follow-up questions I had, and this is the next policy, 6, in terms of how will this be communicated to parents? And it says we're going to put it on the website after it's approved by the board. Was there any talk in the committee about that? And then the second question with that, did you talk about the wellness committees at the different schools? And I know some schools are more active with the wellness committee than others, and so just kind of wondering where that was
well,
at.
the second part of that question, Josh has been a key liaison to many of those groups back at the individual buildings. What was the first part of your question?
How will it be communicated to parents?
And when we drafted the initial wellness policy, we worked with Katie Kaufman to come up with a communication plan for all stakeholder groups, including staff, families, students, teachers. And so we need to revisit that now with this new policy once it's adopted, and that's already been drafted. There may need to be some tweaks based on some of the new verbiage in here, but for the most part, I think it would still stand. A key to that communication plan was providing resources to staff for alternatives to things, and recognizing how important it is that we provide alternatives to using food as incentives.
Okay, and I just would say then, as part of that communication, having your contact as a wellness coordinator out in any communications. Not that you should get all those phone calls you might get, because they should go to the school's wellness, but that would be important. Any other questions on this, Member Oswald?
Different question, yes. It's coming at you. Earlier we talked about Brad Vietz actually buying some curriculum for the restaurant stuff. Is there any curriculum that's going to conflict for our hospitality-based classes with this proposal? And are they still going to be able to perhaps practice, making hospitality industry standard meals and things, because out in the real world with their, earning certifications and going in competitions, they have to prepare other things besides Smart Stack stuff that they get to sell. So
I don't foresee that being an issue. I'll run it past Brad. When you look at our culinary programs, especially like I'm thinking the restaurant and the deli, I'm not immediately aware of anything that they produce that they're selling to students during the school day that would violate those rules. But I'll definitely run it past him just so that he's aware.
Well, and I would like to know if we have to insert any kind of language in here to accommodate curriculum-based stuff, or if they get to make stuff still and give it away during school. I mean, I don't know how that would work, but I just want to cover our bases.
Good point. I'll bring it up with him when I see him tomorrow.
Okay, and so just share, please, with the committee a thank you. I know the committee had many people from the community that brought in health backgrounds, and we really appreciate their involvement. The next item on our agenda is our grant awards that we do each month, and the only one on there is listed on page 83. It's Scott Anderson Leadership Award, and again, this is annually. Do you know how many students, by the way, are?
I don't.
Okay, I know it's a cross-section across the community. So that is the only item there. Any questions on that? Okay. And then just wanted to note on our diploma request, this, I believe, is a list from the ALC graduation. And the okay, so those two graduations, we'll get in July the graduation list from Denfeld and from East, and I will not be probably reading all of them on Tuesday night, but want to recognize all of the graduations in our alternative programs. And then E is our monthly data sharing agreements, and they're listed there. And next month, we will have a full-service communities update from Denfeld. So any other questions, anybody? Okay. Great, thanks. We will adjourn now at 6:10.